Shalom, welcome back. Now we're going to be focusing on third hay verbs in the past tense, and we're going to focus on a few issues that are going to be taking place. In the actual verb form that we utilize in chapter 12, we're looking at resh, aleph, hay. Now there's something that we have to understand with regard to the issue of a guttural, and that's what we see here, is that there is a need for a change that's going to take place. Now I'm going to show you this here. If you used a regular third hay verb that did not have any consonants in the first two positions that interfere with any vowelization, by which there's some kind of need to help it, because there's kind of like accommodations you're going to take place because of the needs that it has. We're going to learn about these very things so we can quickly see how to vowelize these things properly. So here in the third hay verbs, we're looking at the past tense. Here we have bet nun hay, which means to build, and here we have resh aleph hay, which is the word that we're utilizing in this verb in this actual lesson, in lesson 12, which here I said is the aleph is in the second position, which makes it a guttural issue. Okay. And I'm going to add another one, which is the guttural that begins in the first position. So we can see what all we have to do change-wise to these actual patterns, and just how they're going to affect what we're going to be utilizing vowel-wise. So when we put into these two positions, we're looking for only the first and the second root letter. The hay is going to disappear, and this is why we call this a weak verb, because the verb does not retain its full entirety. The third hay drops off, and this is what we find. We find a yud is in the position of where the hay is, with exception to the rule of the third person feminine form, as well as the third person masculine and the third person plural masculine and feminine form. So here, we just place here resh and aleph, and we get the word ra'iti, I saw. Put resh, aleph, and now we get the second person masculine, ra'ita, you saw. Now we go to the third person, second person feminine form, ra'it, you saw. Then we go over here to ra'ah, the third person masculine singular, which was he saw. Notice how in this form the differentiation is we have a kamatz instead of the kamatz and patak. So we have here for the third hay, always we're going to see the kamatz is used because we have the aleph and we have the hay at the end. Okay? So, and that's going to be what we're going to be utilizing specifically because of the hay, because the hay ending is going to absorb the sound of the vowel, and that's what we're putting here. So now we have here, now notice this, you would look at this and may think that using the chart you should say ra'ata, alright, but the problem is we have a shua here. So for the guttural, which is the second letter, where instead of the shua, we're going to put the kamatz kataf. So the kamatz kataf is going to be placed here in place of the shua. So it's going to be ra'ata. So instead of the shua, we put the kamatz kataf here, ra'ata. That's what it's going to look like. Okay? So this is important to know, because we just have to understand that the aleph plays a big role, that it needs a vowel and cannot have a shua underneath it. So therefore, we're going to see the kamatz kataf here. Next we're going to see here is this. We're going to go here. Ra'inu, we saw. Ra'itim, you saw plural, masculine. Ra'iten, you saw plural, feminine. And lastly, Ra'u, they saw. Okay? So this is what we're going to be utilizing with relationship to the differentiations of, here we see that we're going to see a hey is not going to be placed here. We're going to just see the vav at the end. Here we're going to see the tav being replaced for the hey, and all the rest we're going to notice that we're going to put the yud right in the hey's position, and that is going to be the vowelization. So now let's talk about a word that begins with a guttural. So it's a hey verb that begins with a guttural, and what we're going to see here is in all of these cases we're going to hold on to the actual form here predominantly. We're going to basically sit here and we're going to keep the form as it is, with the exception that we're going to be seeing here that we have to understand is really going to be these two second person plural forms. This is the one where we're going to see that instead of the shawah here, because of the ayin, and I'm going to just replace it here for a second so you can see here. So here, if we were to look at this as just blank spaces, all right, and we were to put the ayin here and the nun, the ayin here and the nun, make the nun a little better, all right, we have a problem with the shawah in this case. So what we would do in this case is replace it with the kamatz kataf. Same thing here, the kamatz kataf. So now we have anitem, anitem. So that's how we would have to vocalize it. So in other words, you know, the vocalization is going to stay very straightforward. And the only questions we have to ask is, do we have an ayin at the beginning or do we have a guttural in the middle? And that's going to differentiate between when we're going to use this, the kamatz kataf here in the third person feminine form, and when we have the second person plural form, when we're going to use the kamatz kataf in place of the shawah, if in case we have a guttural that begins. So that's going to be the important thing of learning this thing, because as we go through, I would advise that, you know, if you get this chart and you pull it out, that you add these different segments for your own self onto the chart so that you can differentiate between when a guttural is in the front, that these are the two that have to change vowelization in the front, as well as if a guttural is in the middle, that you have to change the vowelization from here to the middle, to the second root letter, so that there is a vowel sound that's placed instead. Because if you're using any of the letters that are not going to follow these kind of platforms, such as, for example, if I had the root kana, which means to purchase, you can see that these root letters are perfectly fine to fit in the normal flow of vowelization. So we only have to understand the differentiation between when they're going to change is only if the guttural's in the front, are we going to change the second plural form, or if the guttural is in the middle, we're going to have to change the third person feminine singular form. And that's very important here. Now we're going to go and I'm going to pull out the future form so we can see this. So we have the past tense. Now we need to go into the future. So here in the future, in this segment, we're going to be looking at the third hey, and we're going to be utilizing the future in this one. So as I'm working on these, I will get these things finished quickly so we can move forward. You know, Hebrew is not as hard as it may seem at times. We just have to be very diligent, and we have to be willing to just keep pressing forward, so that as we do it, we become more and more confident with it. It just takes time and energy and practice. But eventually, we really get a hold of it and we understand how it works. But these charts are really great because they take away the need to memorize so much the vowels with all the confusing letters that can be placed on top of it, which when you're looking at, unfortunately, vowels and you're looking at letters, sometimes your mind gets a little on the trippy side because you're not able to figure out which vowel goes where, because you're staring at all these different letters and these little dots and dashes, and it becomes difficult. We need to move this up. Yeah, I'm gonna move this up. I just have to move these up here and then I'll be finished. Sometimes it's hard to fit all these pieces in, but you want to be able to get everything so that everything's working just like it needs to be. Okay. So in this section, we're going to be looking at the same thing that we were doing. I just want to look up one thing real quick as I'm going through this to make sure that all the forms. Okay, there we go. All right, so we got everything written on the board. We got all the stuff set up. So now the same thing we're going to be doing. Bet nun hey, resh aleph hey, kaf nun hey, ayin nun hey. We're going to be putting into these actual charts. So the thing I have to understand, and we're going to start first off and foremost with just the resh aleph hey, okay, is we're going to see that there's going to be no worries with regard to this, because there's no shawah that the aleph is going to run into here. So here we have Eirei, I will see, or I might see, or I want to see. Tirei, you will see, you might see, you could see, you ought to see, you could be saying that. Tiri, here we can see that, notice that the hey drops off and we see the yud attached to the end, which makes it the feminine second person. Yirei, he will see, he will want to see, he will see. Tirei, she will see, she will want to see, she should see. Notice I'm utilizing these different terms of these moods: want, will, should, could. This is because, remember, with regard to verbs, and something to point out, the idea of want and possibility, mood of possibility, exists within the actual verb itself. There is no actual attachment or verb helper that we normally see when we see the verbs that are modified by using helping verbs like want and should. This is all a part of the incorporation of what these words express themselves in the forms. So nirei, which means we will see, could mean we want to see or we should see. That's a concept that you can understand with that. And of course here in the plural form for you, tiru, you plural will see. Notice the hey is disappeared and the vav is the only indicator we have here. And then of course we have tirena, you will see, this is feminine plural. Yoru, they will see, or they should see, or they could see. Alright? And then lastly, tirena, they, feminine, will see. Okay? Tirena. So now we just have to go over some of the differentiations with regard to what happens when we have a guttural, for example, here. Okay? So if we have a guttural letter in this position, alright, what's going to happen? Well, let's look at this here. If I was to place the nun and the aleph here, you see that underneath the aleph, what's happening? You're going to see that there's a shawah, right? So we have to change this, okay? And this is what we're going to find. We're going to find that it's going to be a segul kataf, which means we're going to put the vowel here. So na is going to be the vowelization. So that means here we just have to add the vowel in the second position here, right? Because this position here was just a shawah, right? So in this position, in the first position, we're going to replace the vowel. In this case, we're going to change it all together. Both the beginning and the second. So here in this case, we're going to say, instead of tirei, okay, which is what we do here, if we put ayin and nun, okay, we're going to change the vowel, and the vowel in this case is going to be this. We're going to say ta'aneh. So the two vowels are going to be replaced here with the petach and the petach hamatz. Alright? The same thing is going to exist in the next set. When we go down to each of these. Okay, so as we go down, we're going to see, because they have the shawah here, we're going to have to replace each of these with that vowel. Okay, so if I have a third hey verb that has a guttural in the front, then that means I have to, in the first position, change the vowel here to a, which is the segul kataf. In this situation, which I'm going to go back to the beginning formality of what it is, okay? This is what it is, vowel-wise. I have to change it to the kamatz kataf and the chamatz. So the chamatz is going to be here, and the chamatz kataf is going to be here. The same thing goes throughout all of the rest of these. We're going to replace chamatz with, we're going to place the hirik and the segul, or the hirik and the shua with the chamatz and the chamatz kataf, and that's going to be placed into this position here, so that that is taken care of. And this is going to follow suit even over here. We're going to see the same changes over here. And this is just, one of the things that we just have to understand, that when we're dealing with vowels, all right, such as what we see here, this is just what we have to understand. It's the way everything has to change. Everything has to change to this vowelization. I'll put this ayin down here. And lastly. Alright, so we don't have much we have to change, but we do see the vowelization differentiation is going to take place. So in each of these cases, the actual pronoun and the first root letter is going to be pronoun root letter, pronoun root letter. This is how it's going to be. Petach, petach, kataf. Petach, petach, kataf. Alright? So we're going to be seeing that vowel replacing these areas when we're actually putting this into the future. And this is just going to cover all the possible things that we're going to have to run into, because unfortunately, which is the thing that you don't see, is this book, when you're going through it, this book doesn't give you that, okay? Sure, it gives you some charts in the back. Does it cover these problems? No, it doesn't. So now that we're covering these problems, you can actually enjoy the book and actually start going through it and realizing the fact of what you're going to be doing. So third hey verbs are very important. We're going to have to understand the vowelization differentiation when there's a guttural, or when there's a guttural in the middle, what kind of problems are going to occur with that, whether it's past tense or whether it's future tense. So now let's go into the actual lesson itself, and let's continue on as we go forth, so we can get through lesson 12 and joyfully move on to lesson 13. Okay, so here's the lesson that we have. Here's the sentence we have in this lesson here, where we're dealing once again. Notice the vav conversives of this repetitive thing that we're going to see all throughout Scripture, because it's the narrative form. Okay, so here we're going to go through, identify the vav here is obviously a vav conversive. So now we know that vav conversive. Here we know is my pronoun, and so what do we have left? We have two letters, resh and aleph. Now notice, remember when we did the actual breakdown, we said there are different ways that we can go about figuring out which one is the proper root. We said that we can add a yud to the front, we can add a nun to the front, we can add a vav to the middle, we can add a yud to the middle, and we can add a hey to the end, or we can double the last two root letters. Okay? This is the process of elimination. When we're trying to figure out a root, we only have two root letters, right? Because we took the vav, we said the vav conversive. This simply just means and it changes the future to become past. So we know it makes the future past. Alright, makes the future become past. And here we know that this is the pronoun, so now that I know that I got my pronoun, I know that all I have left is the root. Okay, so here, Resh Aleph, that's what I'm talking about, Resh Aleph. Well, what's the word mean? Okay, well, here's my process of elimination. Yod Resh Aleph, Nun Resh Aleph, Resh Vav Aleph, Resh Yud Aleph, Resh Aleph Hey, or Resh Aleph Aleph. And this is where I'm going through the dictionary and I'm working out the process of elimination to see which one it is. And of course, the one that makes absolute sense, this is the one we find out, is Resh Aleph Hey. Now another secret thing that you can do is understand this, okay? When you have, for example, here, a kamatz, okay? The kamatz also can be an indicator that you have a hey ending. But I want to tell you something here that's important to understand, and that's the fact of you can predominantly figure out whenever you have, for example, two root letters, okay? You're going to have, well, you're going to have four possibilities, okay? Number one, it could definitely be a weak yud. Number two, it could definitely be a weak nun. And number three, it could definitely be a weak hey. And of course, here it could be the vav or the yud, which is typically what we see at times when we're dealing with verbs. Typically the vav we would find. So you have four basic possibilities of looking at. You got your the German verbs by which the German verbs is this one. You have your biconsonant verbs. These are the ones where you normally are going to see a vav always in the middle, like bo, or like the word kum. You know, you see the verb that has a vav in the middle. Those are your four. You're basically always going to find that when you put them in the vav conversive form, this is how they're always going to look. You're always going to find two root letters, okay? Always, always, always you're going to see this way, because this is the mainstream of what these verbs are used whenever we find them in this vav conversive form. So that's just something to put into mind. And it's just something that you start realizing over time, how to identify this stuff. So you still have the six possibilities you can go through, but at the same time, you could predominantly say, okay, I definitely have four I can narrow down real quickly. And more likely, as you break through this and stuff, you'll start breaking through and realizing your roots, and you'll start getting it down to a point where you can figure it out. So here we have and he saw. Now we have a noun, okay, which is in what we call a noun construct, okay? So here we have a noun construct. Why is it a noun construct? The reason it's a noun construct is because reason it's a noun construct is because we have two nouns, and this has the definite article. So this makes the noun definite, okay? So one thing we have to understand is, because here we have a verb, all right, and the verb is an action verb that means to see, I can predominantly guess just by looking at this that this is the subject. And the reason why is because I don't see any preposition in front of it, and I also don't see any direct object marker in front of it. So by looking at this, I can immediately say, this looks to me like this is the subject of the sentence. And of course, we're going to find it is. So kol is the word for all or entirety. So all. And then hey, we have, this is our definite article. So the definite article makes the word the in Hebrew. What we have left is the word am. So we have the people. So all the people. Now we're going to put that into this position. So here we have the subject all. So here we're going to replace that with the word he. So that means we're going to say, and all the people saw, rather than and he saw. So all the people is being looked at as one unified group. Okay, even though we have a collective group, the verb is defining it as a single entity. Okay, so here just got to remember single. Entity. So single entity, that's what we're looking at as, okay? Because the verb is what's going to define the action, okay? Very important to understand this. The verb is going to define what's going on. It's going to tell you what it is that's happening, okay? So it's making the statement. Now this is something we're going to find because when we're having boys and girls together, we always use the masculine form, okay? And that's when we're talking about a collective single entity. We're not talking about that with relationship to when we find a boy and a girl spoken of. We're going to find this is going to be a plural form, and we'll see that. Okay? So when we're talking as a single entity, we're going to see that there's all the people vayira saw. Okay? Vayfalu, now we're seeing that the verb is separating this single entity into separate individual people, okay? Because here, we're going to say here, we have the vav conversive. Next we have here, we have our pronoun. Now we have left is the vav at the end. Well, we know the vav at the end that this indicates, and you should know this one, because the vav is always used at the end with the yud in the front as being the indicator of the third person plural form. Okay, so this is also the pronoun. So these two together create the third person plural. Okay, so what we have left is here, what? Pei and lamed, right? Now we're going to go back to that same order of operation, okay? So we're going to say, is it a yud, pei, lamed? Is it a nun, pei, lamed? Is it a pei, vav, lamed? Is it a pei, yud, lamed? Or is it a pei, lamed, hey? Or is it a pei, lamed, lamed? That's the first question we're going to be asking. And then when we go to break down and say, okay, you know what? Make